Welcome to Ovid with Reverb Remixed. I'm going to tell you about the structure of the evening, and then we're going to read some poetry. This is an evening of two halves. In the first half we'll be promoting my latest collection of poetry, which is available free at half time, about half an hour. Please pick up a copy on the table there. In the second half we'll be revisiting Ovid with Reverb, which we performed at Ventnor Fringe in the summer. And while I'm mentioning Ventnor Fringe, obviously it's their 5th birthday tomorrow, so do come to their celebrations. I hear there's free tea from 12 o'clock. So this is both a structured and non-structured evening. When I'm talking now, there's a kind of improvisatory quality about it, and this goes hand in hand with the music. Because just as a recap, when we did Ovid with Reverb, there was a lot of poetry that was in strict beat 4/4 time. I'm a drummer, and I wrote a number of poems that followed Ovid with this strict beat. In this latest half of collection, I've tried to drift off the beat, and this is in keeping with Ovid, because Ovid was writing at a time in ancient Rome when the traditional beat was a 6-beat line, a hexameter. And in his first poem, which you're going to hear in a minute, he rebels against this and constructs a rhythm which is 6/5, 6/5, that he thinks is more suited to love rather than the war poems of the 6-beat line. So we're looking at rhythm throughout this, and as an ex-rock and roll drummer, or perhaps not ex, because I am in a sort of rock and roll band, but used to be playing with in an improv band with Sebastian, we are moving between the 4/4 beat and the more improvised shifting beats in some of these poems. So that's one of the things that you might recognise. So there are a number of themes running through this collection, and the beat is one of them. Another one is criticism, both self-criticism of my own work, because lots of poets write about themselves, and that this idea that I have that in the evening my poetry is great and the next morning it's shit, is something that I try and incorporate into these poems, this where am I going thing. And often with poetry at the beginning of the collection you get this sense that it's all laid out and it's all perfectly planned, and I like this idea that no it isn't, and it's just one step ahead of the punters. I used to be a teacher, and that was always the case, one step ahead of the children, or rather students. So we're kind of fumbling through the evening, and I hope you'll enjoy it. And what we want to start with is a bit of criticism, because the reading Ovid in translation, I fell in love with the Marlowe translations, and later the John Dryden translations. So these are Marlowe's Elizabethan times, 1580s, and John Dryden 100 years later. But Ovid has been popular recently. He went out of popularity with the Romantic movement because he's not really a Romantic poet, and the pre-Romantic poems perhaps over-egged him a bit. But recently there have been a number of translations, some good and some bad. And I came across a translation by an author called Peter Green, who's a great historian, but wrote this book, Ovid the Erotic Poems, where he translated Ovid's first book of poetry, Amores. And what we'd like to do is present to you, at the start of this performance, 2 translations of Ovid's first ever poem. Firstly, I'll read modern translation, and then Lorraine will read John Dryden's 17th century translation. And the story in this poem is interesting. He starts off by saying, I was going to write war poetry, but then Cupid came along and told me not to. And he chained, it was not me, it was Cupid's fault that made me write love poetry. And there's a wit from the start in Ovid's poetry that hopefully you'll enjoy. Now, whether you prefer this translation or the Dryden translation, well, it'd be interesting to see, but if I can precede the translations with just a short excerpt with one of my poems in the collection. On the Ovid translator, Peter Green. The poems here that don't compare poets to Ovid emulate, however badly, the wit of Ovid, found in all the best translations, Marlowe and Dryden's of course, but also Peter Green's recent Tristia, more successful than his dreadful early attempts at Amoris and the art of love. Arms, warfare, violence. I was winding up to produce a regular epic with verse form to match, hexameters naturally. But Cupid, they say, with a snicker, lopped off one foot from each alternate line. Nasty young brat, I told him, who made you inspector of meters? Look, boy, you've got your own empire and a sight too much influence as it is. Don't get ambitious. Quit playing for more, or is your fief universal, is Helicon yours? Can't even Apollo call his lyre his own these days? I'd got off to a flying start, clean paper, one magnificent opening line, number 2 brought me down with a bump. I haven't the theme to suit your frivolous meter, no boyfriend, no girl with a mane of coiffed hair. When I got so far, presto, he opened his quiver, selected an arrow to lay me low, then bent the springy bow in a crescent against his knee and let fly. Hey, poet, he called, you want a theme? Take that! His shafts were as luck for me, never missed their target. I'm on fire now. Love owns the freehold of my heart. So let my verse rise with 6 stresses, drop to 5 on the downbeat. Goodbye to martial epic, and epic meter too. Come on then, my muse, bind your blonde hair with a wreath of sea myrtle and lead me off in the 6/5 groove.
For mighty walls I thought to tune my lute, and made my measures to my subject suit. 6 feet for every verse the muse designed, but Cupid, laughing when he saw my mind, from every second verse a foot purloined. Who gave thee, boy, this arbitrary sway on subjects not thy own commands to lay? Already thy dominions are too large. Be not ambitious of a foreign charge. If thou wilt reign over all and everywhere, the God of music for his harp may fear. Thus, when with soaring wings I seek renown, thou pluckst my pinions, and I flutter down. Could I, on such mean thoughts, my muse employ? I want a mistress, or a blooming boy. Thus I complained, his bow the stripling bent, and chose an arrow fit for his intent. The shaft its purpose fatally pursues. Now, poet, there's a subject for thy muse, he said. Alas, too well, he knows his tread, for in my breast a mortal wound he made. Far hence, ye proud hexameters remove, my verse is paced and trammelled into love. With myrtle wreaths my thoughtful brow enclose, while in unequal verse I sing my woes.
As a footnote to this, if you read any of Peter Green's books on Ovid, he attacks Dryden on a number of occasions. And the reason he does this, because Dryden writes an iambic pentameter in 5-beat line, which was really popularised by Christopher Marlowe and perfected by Dryden. And Peter Green says that this was a very English pattern that was really unsuited to trying to translate Ovid. So what Peter Green does in his poetry, his lines are irregular and he tries to copy Ovid, whether you think he's successful or not. I'll leave it to you. But back to the collection. What are you trying to do in this collection, Steve? Good question. I had spare poems over from the last collection that weren't right, so I gave them a tweak. And doing this, more poems came to mind. So I wrote them down and they reminded me of poems I'd written some time ago. So I found them amongst my reasonably functioning filing system. Hey presto, had nearly enough for a pamphlet collection. At the same time, sensing they all had a connection, I wrote a few more emphasising this connection. Although, as you know, explanatory poems are notoriously difficult. And when they're finished, the explanation's often gone, and what you're left with, some anecdote or other, is nice, but not what you wanted. This collection was written during the summer of 2019 in Ventnor, Isle of Wight. I usually go for a walk in between periods of writing, but as the summer was hot, I went to the beach and floated in the water instead. I'm wondering whether the rhythms in these poems are influenced by this change of habit. The Holy Grail is not to write on Ovid, but like Ovid. Anyone can write a poem on Ovid, but to write like him with limping lines more suited to Latin, while still retaining the wit of Ovid, the crisp and sometimes vicious humour of Ovid, found in all the best translations, seas that bore him in exile from Rome to Thomas, storms that tossed him from fore to aft, stern to helm, leeward to windward, lines hexameter then pentameter, pushing the reader from fore to aft, stern to helm, leeward to windward, away from regular metre, tossing, elating regular metre, dreading readers amongst the waves of Ovidian verse. Something like that in the English language will do nicely. How to fit a 5-beat line in 4/4 time in simple double 4/4 time and then add 3 beats to finish the line. Then the mass constructs an atmosphere both martial and impartial, as if a voice were caught between a choice. The first a marching, barking kick of bile, the second more a lusting in denial, the first a Johnny Rotten and the second a Nico from the velvet underground, and just in case monotony desists, from being fun becomes monotonous, there is a middle late where I can sort of concentrate the mind before returning to the beat with amplified intensity. Da 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 da.
2, 3, 4.
Etc. Etc. Ra ra ra.
2, 3, 4.
Blah 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 blah.
2, 3, 4.
So, as I said, this collection is about beat. And what I'd like to do in the remaining 10 minutes is just to read a few poems, not necessarily about Ovid, but in the spirit of Ovid. Ovid wrote his first collection, his first 2 collections were love poetry, and so the first 2 poems I'll read are kind of almost pastiches of that love poetry, but given a modern twist. And in the last poem, with help from Sebastian, we'll be kind of addressing Ovid's most famous book, Metamorphoses, where various characters, often gods or demigods, change form within a story, and we're updating it to a modern day metamorphosis from zero to hero is often cited as a kind of a dramatic arc, so we'll be having a look at that.